The text came in at 7:43 p.m. on a Thursday. Your wife just checked in with him again. Room 412. I'm sorry. You deserve to know. Unknown number. No name. No context. Just those 3 sentences sitting on my screen like a verdict somebody forgot to read me in court. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack because I was already there. Already in the lobby of that hotel, sitting in a chair beside a fake plant, nursing a coffee I'd bought 20 minutes earlier when the front desk clerk gave me a look that said he knew exactly why a man sits alone in a hotel lobby on a Thursday night in a jacket that still smells like a job site. I looked at the text one more time. Then I looked at the elevator. Then I ordered a second coffee. Because I wasn't going up to room 412. I was going to wait for her to come down. And I had already called the one person whose presence in that lobby would make sure the truth didn't have anywhere left to hide. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 44 years old. I run a small electrical contracting company in Charlotte, North Carolina. 7 employees, 2 vans, a reputation I built from scratch over 15 years, doing work people don't see but can't live without. I'm not a complicated man. I pay on time, I show up early, and I've never once in my adult life sent a problem to voicemail and called it handled. That's the whole character description. Everything else you need to know will come through in the telling. Lauren and I had been married for 9 years. She was a hospital administrator, sharp as a blade, organized in the way that makes you feel like the world runs cleaner when she's in it. She had a system for everything: the pantry, the finances, the weekend calendar, the way she folded towels. I used to tease her about the towels. She'd fold them military style and stack them by size, and I'd deliberately pull one from the middle just to watch her restack the whole shelf. She'd roll her eyes and do it without complaining, and somewhere in that small routine was the whole language of our marriage for the first several years. Easy, comfortable, real. Year 6 brought a promotion, senior director level. Bigger team, longer hours, a new set of colleagues who operated in a world of catered lunches and conference travel, and the kind of professional socializing that requires a different wardrobe and a different version of yourself. Lauren grew into it fast. I was proud of her, said so regularly, covered the nights she worked late without a word about it, rearranged my schedule when hers demanded flexibility. That's what a partner does. What I didn't clock fast enough was the way she started leaving pieces of herself at the office and coming home to me with whatever was left over.
The name I kept hearing was Derek Scholes, VP level, her department's liaison to the executive team, the kind of man who gets described as dynamic in performance reviews. She mentioned him the way people mention weather, casually, as background, as if his name was just part of the atmosphere at her job. Derek thinks we should restructure the reporting timeline. Derek had a good point in the board meeting. Derek and I grabbed lunch to work through the Q3 numbers. I filed each mention in the back of my mind under things that aren't problems until they are. Then came the work trips, 3 in 8 months. Nashville, Dallas, then Atlanta. All legitimate. She showed me the conference agendas, the hotel bookings through the company system, the itineraries with her name on them. I'm not a man who demands accountability like it's surveillance. I trusted her. I told myself that out loud often enough that it started functioning like a mantra instead of a belief. The small things accumulated the way they always do. A password changed on a phone that used to sit unlocked on the coffee table. A laugh from the other room that stopped the moment I walked in. Texts answered at odd hours with her body angled away from me. The specific way she'd started saying, "I'm tired," at the end of evenings that used to end differently. I'm an electrician by trade. I understand circuits. I understand that when a signal stops flowing the way it should, something in the system has changed. You don't ignore the diagnostic. You trace the line. The break came from a man named Phil Garrett. Phil ran the hotel bar at the Meridian, a mid-range business hotel 15 minutes from our house. He'd been a customer of mine 4 years back when we rewired his brother's restaurant. Good guy, quiet, the kind of bartender who pays attention to everything and mentions none of it unless it matters. He texted me on a Tuesday. "Hey man, this is awkward and tell me to mind my business if you want, but I've seen Lauren here twice now with the same guy. Not at the bar, checking in. Thought you should know." He left his number, said call if I wanted to talk. I stared at that text for a long time. Then I called Phil. He was straightforward about it. Twice in 6 weeks, same man both times, mid-40s, business casual, valet parking a silver Audi. Lauren had walked in ahead of him both times, like they were practicing a system. They checked in separately, went up in the elevator separately. Phil had noticed because Lauren had attended a hospital fundraiser at his venue 2 years prior, and he'd remembered her face. He wasn't certain it meant what it looked like. He said that twice, but he thought I should know. I thanked him. I meant it. We hung up. I didn't call Lauren. I didn't confront her that night or the next morning or during the 3 days I spent doing what I always do when I need to think clearly. I worked. I pulled long days, ran my crew, solved problems that had solutions, and let the other ones sit in the back of my mind, cooking down to something I could actually use.
On the 4th day, I called a woman named Sandra O'Coffer. She did civil and domestic investigative work, had a reputation for clean documentation and zero drama. I didn't hire her to build a case I could wave in Lauren's face. I hired her because I needed to stop wondering and start knowing. Wondering is the thing that rots you from the inside. Facts, even terrible ones, are something you can actually work with. Sandra took 2 weeks. On a Friday afternoon, she sent me a file. I opened it at my kitchen table with a glass of water, and Hank, our dog, a 7-year-old shepherd mix who had the good sense to put his head in my lap without being asked. The file had dates, times, and photographs. Not graphic, just damning. Lauren entering the Meridian. Lauren and Derek Scholes in the lobby. Close in the particular way of people who've stopped managing their body language because they think they're not being watched. Hotel folios Sandra had obtained through her own channels. 2 separate rooms on the same floor, same nights. Check-in times 40 minutes apart. 4 visits across 6 weeks. The last entry in the file was a note from Sandra. Based on pattern, probable Thursday recurrence. This week falls in line. I read that sentence 3 times. It was Tuesday. I had 2 days. I didn't spend them spiraling. I spent them preparing. On Wednesday morning, I called my brother-in-law, Kevin, Lauren's older brother, 15 years a Charlotte police detective, the kind of man whose presence in a room changes the temperature without him saying a word. Kevin and I had been close since before I married his sister. He'd stood beside me at the wedding. His kids called me Uncle Marcus. When I told him what I had, there was a long silence on his end. Not disbelief, just the weight of a man absorbing something he'd hoped he'd never have to. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Thursday night," I said. "The Meridian lobby. Just be there." He didn't ask why the lobby instead of the room. Kevin understood what I understood. A confrontation in a hotel hallway is a scene. 2 people standing in a lobby when someone walks off the elevator is a reckoning. Different energy entirely. "I'll be there," he said. No speech, no advice, just a brother choosing a side. Thursday arrived the way days do when you've been watching the calendar too closely, too fast, and then all at once. I went to work, ran my crew through a commercial panel installation in Ballantyne, signed off on the day's paperwork, and drove to the Meridian at 6:15 p.m. I parked in the public lot, walked through the main entrance, and sat down in a chair beside a large potted plant near the elevator bank.
I ordered a coffee from the lobby cafe. The chair had a clear sight line to the front entrance and both elevators. I'd checked the layout once before, 3 days ago, while pretending to look for a meeting space for a fictional company event.
Kevin arrived at 6:40 and sat across from me without a word. He was in plain clothes, jacket, no badge visible, but Kevin has the bearing of a man who doesn't need a badge to communicate authority. The young couple at the next table instinctively sat up straighter when he walked past. We didn't talk much, just two men in a hotel lobby, coffees going cold, watching the door. At 7:31 p.m., Lauren walked in. I saw her before she saw me. She was in a charcoal blazer I'd seen before, roller bag behind her, phone in her hand. She had the particular focused walk of someone moving through a space on a schedule, not looking around because she'd already decided there was nothing to look for. She went straight to the desk, checked in with the efficiency of someone who'd done it before, did not look toward the seating area. The elevator doors opened. She stepped in without a backward glance. At 7:43, my phone buzzed. The unknown number. Your wife just checked in with him again. Room 412. I'm sorry. You deserved to know. I looked at it, looked at Kevin. He raised an eyebrow. I turned the phone so he could read the screen. He looked at it, then back at me. Someone else in your corner, he said quietly. Apparently, I said. I thought about that text for a moment. Someone in that hotel, a staff member, someone in the lobby, someone who knew both of us and knew the situation, had seen Lauren check in and decided a stranger's marriage mattered enough to make an anonymous call to conscience. I didn't know who sent it then, I still don't now, but whoever it was, they sent it to a man already sitting 20 feet from the elevator, and in some strange way, that timing felt like the universe confirming what I'd spent 3 weeks quietly verifying. I did not go to room 412. I want to be clear about that decision and why I made it. Going upstairs was a hallway scene, a door scene, whatever came through that door scene. It was adrenaline and chaos, and two people caught in the worst possible version of their own story. I didn't want chaos. I'd spent 15 years building a business on the principle that you don't touch a live wire until you've cut the power. The power in this situation was Lauren's ability to manage the narrative, to reframe, to use my reaction as the story instead of her actions. I wasn't going to hand her that. So Kevin and I sat, ordered food from the lobby menu, talked about his kids, his oldest's baseball season, a trip he was planning to take his family in the fall. We talked like two men at a dinner who had nowhere else to be, because we didn't. At 9:58 p.m., the elevator opened, and Lauren walked out alone. She had freshened up. That small detail hit harder than most. She'd taken the time to fix her hair and her lipstick before coming back down, because coming back down was the performance for the commute home, and she wanted to look the part.
She was 10 feet into the lobby before she saw me. The stop was total, the way a person stops when the ground changes under them without warning. Her roller bag kept rolling 2 more inches on its own momentum and then rocked to a halt. Her face went through 4 things in about 2 seconds: confusion, recognition, calculation, and then something that wasn't quite fear but lived in the same neighborhood. Kevin stood up. Lauren's eyes moved to him, and something in her face collapsed in a specific way. Not because of what Kevin's presence meant legally, because of what it meant personally. Her brother, standing in a hotel lobby, looking at her the way older brothers look when they've driven somewhere they didn't want to go because the person they love left them no choice. "Kevin," she said. His name barely made it out. "Hey, Lauren." His voice was level. Not cold, just done managing the warmth. She looked back at me. I'd stood up by then.
I wasn't angry. I want to make sure that's clear because I know what this kind of story is supposed to look like at this moment. The raised voice, the accusations, the public implosion that people at surrounding tables film on their phones. None of that happened. I was just a man standing in a hotel lobby looking at his wife coming off an elevator she had no good reason to be on. "We should go home," I said. She swallowed. "Marcus, you can follow in your car or ride with me and get your car tomorrow, but we're not doing this here." Kevin picked up his jacket. "I'll call you tomorrow," he told me. He looked at Lauren for a moment longer than necessary, not cruelly, just with the full weight of what he knew, and then he walked out the front doors. Lauren and I stood there for a moment in the lobby of the Meridian, her roller bag between us like a small boarder. "Okay," she said, barely above a whisper. "I'll follow you." We drove home in separate cars down the same roads we'd driven together 1,000 times, and the distance between us felt wider than any freeway. What happened at the kitchen table that night is between me and her, and I'm going to keep most of it there because some things deserve that privacy even when the marriage doesn't survive them. What I will tell you is that she didn't insult me with the "it's not what you think" line. She was too smart for that. And by then she'd had the 40-minute drive home to understand that what I knew was comprehensive. She cried, she apologized, she said Derek meant nothing, which is a sentence that somehow manages to be an insult on top of an injury. She said she'd been unhappy and lost, and that none of it was my fault. I listened to all of it, every word, because a man who builds things for a living understands that before you can know what's salvageable, you have to do a full inspection. I inspected. I listened. I asked the questions I needed answered and received the answers I'd mostly already known.
Then I told her I needed her to go stay with her parents for a while. She asked if I meant for good. I said I didn't know yet, but that I needed to think in a space that wasn't contaminated by the version of our life I'd been living in while she was building a different one. She packed a bag. I carried it to her car, not because she needed the help, because it was the last decent thing I could think to do, and decency was the only thing I still had full control over. She pulled out of the driveway at 12:47 in the morning. I stood on the porch until her taillights turned the corner. Hank sat next to me and we watched the empty street together for a while. The next 2 months were the kind of work nobody puts on a resume. I called an attorney named James Aldridge, who was recommended by a colleague who'd been through his own version of this and came out the other side intact. James was methodical and unsentimental and spoke in plain language that didn't try to soften things into shapes they weren't. He walked me through what the next steps looked like, and I walked out of his office with a checklist and a strange sense of relief that comes when a problem finally has a process attached to it. I protected what I'd built. The business, the house, purchased in my name before the marriage, the accounts I'd been the primary contributor to for 9 years. Not out of spite, out of the same logic that makes you pull a permit before you break ground. You do things correctly because correctly is what holds. Derek Scholes, I learned through channels I won't detail here, had done something similar 2 years prior with a woman in his previous department. That information didn't change my situation, but it clarified something about Lauren's judgment that I needed to understand. She hadn't been swept off her feet by an exceptional man. She'd been available to an experienced one. That distinction mattered to me, and I couldn't fully explain why, except that it did. Kevin called me the morning after the lobby. We talked for an hour, the longest we'd talked since before Lauren and I were married. He told me things about her he'd never said when saying them would have felt like interference. I understood why he'd waited. I didn't hold it against him. By the end of the call, we'd made plans to go fishing the following weekend, something we'd been saying we'd do for 3 years. We went. Didn't catch much. Talked about everything except the obvious. That was the right call. The divorce was finalized 4 months after the lobby. I want to tell you something about those 4 months,
because the story that's easy to tell is the one where a wronged man rises, rebuilds, comes out stronger, collects his dignity, end scene. That story exists, but inside it is the actual experience, which is messier and quieter and more expensive in ways that have nothing to do with attorney fees.
There were nights I sat at that kitchen table with a glass of bourbon and went back through 9 years like a man reviewing footage from a job that went wrong, looking for the moment he should have caught. There were mornings I woke up and the first 3 seconds felt normal before they didn't. There was a particular Sunday in November when I drove past a restaurant we used to go to and had to pull over for a few minutes. Not for dramatic effect, just because grief doesn't check your schedule before it shows up. But here's what's also true. My crew never missed a beat. The commercial contract I'd landed in September came in on time and under budget. Kevin became a regular at my house in a way he hadn't been since before Lauren and I got busy living our own life. My neighbor Dale, a retired contractor who'd watched my business grow from a 2-van operation, started stopping by on Saturday mornings with bad coffee and good conversation, and I learned that community doesn't disappear when a marriage does. It just becomes visible. And Hank remained a constant and uncomplicated presence in my life, which I cannot overstate the value of. The anonymous text I received in the lobby, "Your wife just checked in with him again." I never found out who sent it. I have a theory. Phil Garrett, the hotel bartender who'd first reached out to me, had connections throughout that hotel through his brother's events work. He might have known someone. That someone might have seen Lauren check in and made a call. Or it was someone entirely different, a person with their own reasons for wanting the truth in circulation. What I think about sometimes is the word "again" in that text. Not "your wife checked in." Your wife just checked in with him again. Whoever sent it knew the pattern, knew it wasn't the first time, sat with that knowledge long enough to decide it was no longer something they could stay quiet about. I understand that feeling now better than I used to. Staying quiet about the truth you're holding is its own kind of weight. At some point, the weight gets too heavy and you put it down. I put it down in the lobby of the Meridian on a Thursday night by simply being there, already knowing, already steady, already done being the last person in the room to understand the situation. A man I'd worked with early in my career, a master electrician named Bert who had 35 years in the trade, used to say that the most dangerous moment in any electrical job is when you think you already know what you're dealing with. The second you stop reading the actual system in front of you and start trusting the assumption you walked in with, that's when it bites you. I'd been trusting the assumption for about 2 years too long. I don't make that mistake anymore. Not in work, not in anything.
These days, I get to the shop at 5 a.m. and I leave when the work is done. I've hired a third crew and I'm looking at a second location in the spring. Kevin and I go fishing on the first Saturday of every month, rain or cold, no exceptions. That's the rule we made. I got a new truck. The old one finally gave out in January. Went out with dignity at 214,000 miles, which is all you can ask of anything. The chair by the fake plant in the Meridian lobby is still there. I drove past the hotel a few weeks ago and found myself thinking about that night. The cold coffee, the quiet conversation with Kevin, the moment Lauren walked off the elevator and stopped moving like the ground had shifted under her feet. I thought about the 9 years that led to that lobby and the 4 months that followed it, and what a man does with all of that once the paperwork is signed and the house stops sounding like a question. He works. He shows up. He fixes what can be fixed, and he stops standing in front of what can't, pretending it isn't broken. He pays what he owes, and he collects what's his. That's the whole job description. If you were in that lobby, coffee in hand, text on the screen, do you go up to room 412, or do you wait for her to come down? Leave your answer in the comments, because how you answer that tells you something about yourself worth knowing. Subscribe to hear what came after. The ground's solid.
The work continues.